Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edward Sullivan. I am the founder and CEO of Trust Exchange, and we're with our guest and partner 3Pass going to have a little bit of a webinar this afternoon. However, I want to wait a couple of minutes. I messed up the time in one of the invitations, so I want to make sure that people have plenty of time to log on and participate. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ed Sullivan. I am the founder and CEO of Trust Exchange. Thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. We are joined today by our partner, 3PAS. Beth Wexler is the representative, and what we're going to talk about is one of the tough challenges in managing in doing risk management, and it's the assessment aspect. Beth, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Also, anyone, if you have questions as we're progressing through the presentation, feel free to enter the questions into the sidebar. You should be able to, it should be self-explanatory on how to put a question in, and we will try to answer them either in line or at the end. So thanks again. I'm sure everyone on here is familiar with the problem, but vendor risk management and third-party risk management in general has gotten a lot of attention in the past couple of years due to regulatory pressure. So the direction of the regulations kind of seem unpredictable and ever-changing. There's the regulations themselves, there's the guidelines, and then there's a lot of thought leaders that are putting information out. So there's lots of what, but not a lot of how. There's a lot of information out there on what do you have to do. You have to manage your vendors, for example, in a risk-appropriate way, but there's not a lot of guidance on how to do that, and how to do that at scale, and how to do that effectively. So pressure's increasing. There's a lot of confusion, and costs are rising. So wouldn't it be nice if you can do all of the above? Reduce your complexity, reduce your costs, increase the visibility of all of your third parties throughout your organization, standardize your assessments, and decrease the risk. So one of the things we want to talk about is this assessment piece, and there's a lot of third parties that will do things like, hey, we'll do a SOC 1 or a SOC 3, which may be appropriate in some instances, but also may be overkill for vendors that aren't in the highest risk category. So with that, I'd like to introduce Beth to talk a little bit about her company and what they do. Beth?
Sure. Hey, Ed, did you put up the slide I may not be seeing the proper screen. There we go.
There.
Actually, there it is. Perfect. Good afternoon. So let me just give you a little background. 3Pass was formed in 2013. We sort of went global, as we call it, in 2016. But basically what we've done is we've created a web-based application to manage your third-party risk. We use a patented two-part assessment to triage all your vendors. So basically what we have is a part A, which is a screening tool. And we put all of your vendors through the screening tool to figure out what kind of risks they present to your institution. Depending on that, and we basically call that triaging. So we are screening your vendor population, and then we separate your critical vendors from your non-critical vendors. And so part B of our scored assessment, and it actually is a scored assessment, is basically does a deeper dive, asks multiple questions. It's a dynamic vendor risk tool, and it will produce a score much like a credit score, and then you can rate the risk that these vendors present to your company. We do know that a lot of the regulatory bodies like our product. They've told the customers of ours that use it that they do. And basically what happens is, one of the things that you're supposed to do through regulatory guidance is review your vendors on an annual basis. So we do auto renewals, annual auto renewals. Anytime we have a vendor in our system, when that anniversary date of their original assessment comes along, we do an auto renewal. We do a you're able to share these assessments. The vendors can share the assessments with their various business partners. Our part B, which does the deeper dive, is actually based on the ISO 27001 and 2 frameworks, HIPAA frameworks, NIST frameworks, and it's a great tool. It's easy to manage, easy to review, and it's relatively inexpensive. And I'm going to hand it back over. Okay. Oh, here I am. Okay. So this sort of explains basically our process. So everybody gets the VRA for part A, all your vendors. And usually what is the turning point between a critical and a non-critical vendor is whether or not that vendor has connectivity or any kind of data transmissions, anything where they have access to your sensitive and confidential customer data. If they do not have those three aspects within their relationship with you, we consider them a non-critical vendor. So then you can see that only the vendors who are critical end up taking part B. And part B is designed for those vendors that have connectivity, that do data transmissions, that have access to your confidential, sensitive customer information. And so basically only those critical vendors will take the vendor risk assessment.
So let me describe what Trust Exchange is, and then we'll get into how 3Pass and Trust Exchange work together. So Trust Exchange is a B2B information platform. It's a sort of social network for enterprises to exchange key information via this social interface. We feel that we're solidly in the middle of what's called the collaborative economy. The common denominator here among these companies is that the number of steps between the creation of a good or a service and the consumption of a good or service, because of the internet and things like network effects and social technologies, those layers and those steps are collapsed. So for instance, Uber, you no longer have to schedule a taxi to come pick you up. You can use your phone, press a button, and have somebody come within minutes. Waze, They no longer have to, set a helicopter up into the sky to look at the highways and tell you what the traffic is. They're polling people's apps, miles per hour, speed, location, and questions and input to figure out what's going on. We're doing the same thing, except rather than drivers and riders and rides, we're bringing together the peers in each different industry. So, for instance, here, financial industry, who are the best assessors of third parties, and who are the best assessors of vendors, and that's how we're bringing 3Pass onto our platform. And our platform solves the problem pretty elegantly. If you think about this situation, this graphic here kind of describes the size of the problem. So it's 4x4. Let's assume that there's 4 banks and 4 vendors only. The number of transactions and interactions that you have to have, and this graph assumes all of those transactions and interactions are successful. So if I'm calling you up and asking you for your assessment or your proof of insurance or your financial audits, that all of those transactions and interactions are successful. And you could see that it gets exponential pretty quickly. Now put yourself in the spot of a vendor where they're on the receiving side of all these requests, and they might send you an audit, and then next month that audit is no longer valid, they've refreshed it, etc. So we give value to the vendors too, because we enable them to control the version, control who sees things, when they see it, and then also through our platform, we allow for the mass distribution. So vendors can subscribe to your requirements, and then they can broadcast their fulfillment of those requirements to you. Here's my proof of insurance, here's my etc. With 3Pass, they're integrated to our platform, so the 3Pass assessments get broadcast via our platform and fulfill your requirements for due diligence and recurring due diligence. So the components of our platform are kind of threefold. The first one is a dashboard. So all of our clients would get a dashboard, and each segment of the dashboard you can create custom policies. So in my tier 1, I may have policies that, I need the 3Pass assessment, I need proof of insurance, and I need each one of these things annually, but I might need proof of insurance quarterly, and other things at different frequencies. And then in the lower moderate, you're able to set additional criteria. You can also, rather than just have high, medium, low, you can do it by vendor type. So you can say, okay, here's my staffing vendor. These are the things I need, and these are the frequencies. So you can create custom monitoring criteria and risk policies that can be automatically pumped into the dashboard, gives you visibility throughout the organization so that each party can have multiple dashboard views. So you might have like the chief risk officer view, you may have the head of IT view, the HR director's view, etc., so that they could see how their vendors are performing. These policies, which are resident in the dashboard, are really where some of our power is unleashed. So you can create these custom policies and risk categories to more precisely segment those risk profiles by geography, by risk, by industry, by vendor type, etc., and look at them based on the policies for each of those segments and subsegments. Then you get daily real-time alerts. You also get reports, and then an email that comes out once a day saying, in your portfolio, this is what happens. Our system also provides a way for vendors to submit this information to you, or for you to submit the information that you may have on a given vendor. We also integrate with other third parties to bring stuff in, like news articles, etc. And here we're integrated with 3Pass so that we can bring their assessments in and have them, the streamlined version of their assessment, come in right on the profile. You can see whether or not it's happened. You can see whether it's due. You can see if it's been complete or refreshed, etc. So Beth, would you like to talk about like the assessment and the assessment score and how that fits in here?
Yeah, so basically, I just kind of wanted to give you guys a taste of what sort of a sneak peek at our scored Part B assessment. And as you can see, when you look at it right over on the right-hand side, the 861, that was the score that the assessment generated on this particular vendor. You can see a few lines down from the top, you can actually set those risk parameters. So a low risk entity, so the higher your score, the lower the risk, which is much like a FICO score. And you as a company, as the institution that's monitoring your risk, you can change those numbers if need be. But basically, I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what the B assessment looks like. And basically, through the established frameworks, we're assessing your vendor's risk management, their information security, management information systems, incident reporting and management programs, physical security, insurance coverage and BCPs, regulatory and legal compliance, and other facets of risk compliance. So the assessment itself is dynamic. So your vendors could be answering 200 questions or 400 questions. Really depends on the decision trees, the logic that's built into the assessment, and based on their yes or no or non-applicable answers, there are algorithms in there that weight these questions and then produce the score. So we just wanted to give you a little taste of what that looked like. Also, just for your information, usually the universe, if you've got 100 vendors, usually your universe of critical vendors is maybe 10-15% of those vendors. So they're the ones that are the critical vendors. They're the ones who are taking this scored risk assessment. So we just wanted to give you a taste of it.
So if there are any questions, please put them into the sidebar and we will answer them. But if you'd like more information, if you go to, you can go to trustexchange.com/3PAS partnership and fill out the form, and we will get back to you, set up a demo. I think that there may be opportunity to come in and see how we are integrated and provide this joint service. So let me look and see if there's any questions. One question on implementation time. So the implementation time varies kind of based on the number of vendors that are being monitored. From the Trust Exchange perspective, since we're a social network, you don't need to enter in 100% of your vendors. There's especially with financial institutions, there's a pretty large overlap. We have almost 1,000 vendors in the database right now that we are tracking. And what happens is that if 10 other financial institutions are monitoring that vendor, you get to see all of that information that's been contributed into the network. So from that perspective, it might take a couple of days to set Trust Exchange up. It's probably going to be a little bit longer to do an assessment on each vendor or refresh them unless they've already have them completed. Beth, do you have anything to add around the time it takes to do these assessments?
Sure. Usually what our system, we basically, once we get, and the way this works is you as the company or institution that's trying to evaluate your third-party vendors, what happens is you give us a full name, an email address, and the name of the company, and we actually send out a request asking that person and that entity to start the process by taking Part A. Part A is usually 5 or 6 questions that you determine that you're going to decide how you want to vet your vendors. So those questions are we'll give you some guidance, but they're really established by you and your risk criteria. So once we do that and we send out a request, and within if somebody, it's a matter of how quickly your vendors answer the survey, we get those results back. We evaluate them, and then that's when we do the triage. We separate your critical to non-critical. Takes usually 24 to 36 hours to do that. If they're critical vendors, we then let the company know that we have determined that based on these answers. We usually, sometimes our companies ask us to review those with us before we send out the request for Part B. And we'll send out then the request for Part B. Part B is a longer, deeper dive, so it's going to take your vendor a little longer to complete those questions, maybe an hour, maybe two. They can reassign various parts of that assessment to different people in their group. So it's our process is pretty quick. And by the way, that assessment automatically gets scored and is automatically uploaded into our system. And then what ends up happening is we get a notice that says X company, X vendor completed their assessment and their score was X, which we then would communicate back to the financial institution or insurance company or broker or dealer, whoever's requesting
it. Another question is on pricing. Well, so the pricing model varies, and it's a function of how many vendors you're monitoring on the platform. And what we're doing is providing packages based on scale, how many vendors you have, how many administrators you have, how many dashboards, what level do they want to see, etc. So to really understand what your needs are, we would have to sit down and find out how many vendors you have, how many you want to get assessed, etc. But it can be anywhere from $500 or $600 per month up to thousands per month based on the size of the institution, etc. And we're happy to talk to you about that. Any other questions?
Ed, how about I know one of the tricky parts about the vendor management is just being able to capture and identify who your vendors are. And that's sort of it's really easy when you create procedures to handle once you establish your program, handling the vendors that are basically signing various contracts with your with your institution. It's really easy to get those vendors in line. Your Achilles heel and what is probably or could be causing some sleepless nights are the vendors that are currently accessing your system and your data, or have access to your confidential customer information. You might not even know who has access to your system based on how you've tracked vendors in the past. So that's a critical piece of this, and usually the hard part for an entity to wrap their head around. And we've got some experience in that and helping you harvest and harness your vendors that are currently operating within your network. So
one thing that we see often is, especially when somebody's just kind of starting up, or they've been found to be less than adequate by a regulator, especially in financial services, banks, credit unions, etc., is that faced with not having done this before, the common sense thing to do is, let's go to the accounting system, let's go look and see everyone that we paid in the past 12 months, and they're by definition a vendor. However, there's a large swath of risk and vendors that get missed, because there are, especially in banking, where there's vendors that aren't paid directly out of the accounts payable, but might be paid out of settlement from an escrow account or via a third-party fee or something like that. So you really do have to kind of go down to that next level to be in full compliance with the regulations and the published guidelines. So that's a good point, Beth, is being able to really have a 360 understanding of who your vendors are, what is their risk profile, and what are the things that you should be assessing based on the risks that they present your organization. Do they see the data? Do they not see the data? Or are they providing this critical function for the institution?
Well said.
I don't see any more questions. And Beth, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, other than, I didn't really get into any real pricing and I'd be happy to talk to any of, anyone on the call if they want to reach out to me. The bottom line is, this is a strategic alliance with Trust Exchange. And so, we are going to work in conjunction with them to basically provide these services at the lowest cost possible to the institutions, because we do know that it is a regulatory requirement, and we know that budgets for this type of thing are not extravagant. So we will work with the institutions to come up with something that works for them.
Yeah. So if anyone is interested, go to the website on the screen, trustexchange.com/3PAS partnership, and fill out the very short form there, and we will get back to you pretty quickly and try to set up a demo and a call to answer any more questions you may have and let you see for yourselves how well this operates.
Great. And I just want to thank everyone for listening in.
Yes. So thank you all for coming. Have a great afternoon. And this webinar has been recorded, and we will put it out on our website within the next week or two. So thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ed.
Take care, Beth.